When last year's presidential election rolled out, it would be natural to Google for the family history of the vice president. If you did, you would have noted the name Shyamala Gopalan, the mother of Kamala Harris. By the time I meandered through various references, I felt my journey, evolution of values, principles, and responses to experiences I have had reflected in the tangible and intangible elements of her life. I'll explore these with you today. The coalition of minority professional engineering societies resonates really well with me. I am a life member of SWE SHPE NSBE and have endowed a scholarship in my mother's name to support students from these three organizations. I direct a university industry faculty student group called Diversity and Excellence in Engineering, just to frame this very same principle. But let's get to my immigrant journey and Shyamala Gopalan's trajectory. I was an immigrant to America in 1988 after completing my undergraduate degree in engineering in Pune, now known as Pune. I arrived in America after growing up in Bombay, now Mumbai, a very cosmopolitan and urban metroplex. I arrived as a student on an F-1 visa, and my mother had put all her savings to enable me to have the appropriate documentation to enable my enrollment at Auburn University, Alabama. I subsequently moved to Texas A&M as my now husband secured a job in Texas after graduating from his master's degree. We married in 1993, a year before graduation, and then we both worked through the jobs and became permanent residents through my establishing scientific merits. Research and bringing people in are the two drivers to all that I do. The 2015 SWE Engineering Distinguished Educator Award stands out as the award I most appreciate receiving. It reflects alignment with these two principles. As we explore Shyamala Gopalan's life and choices, these values are reflected in extraordinary ways. I found her journey captured various identities: the Indian woman, immigrant, wife, doctoral holder, and divorcee. Not that common. While Shyamala Gopalan is often referenced as a scientist, I was astonished that she graduated with a degree in home science, typically adopted by women who would not work outside the home. As the information reflects, this was not from choice. However, in 1958, she applied to do her master's degree in Berkeley in nutrition and endocrinology. Her parents cashed in retirement money similar to my own mother to ensure this degree. There are multiple dimensions to this decision. From The Atlantic, we learned that while Indian Americans now number 4 million, Gopalan arrived at the time when discriminatory immigration laws placed quotas on Asian immigrants. The number of Indians allowed to move to the US was capped at 100 per year, and Gopalan was one of 12,000 Indian Americans and one of the very few women. Most starkly, she faced racism from the first day she began work. The next element of her journey is that we learn within 4 years of arrival, she embraces standing up for the equality of others. She learns of a sit-in protest in Woolsworth in North Carolina and does one in California. She attends a rally and meets Donald Harris, a Jamaican immigrant student in the social sciences. They marry soon after. She has her daughter the same year that she gets her doctorate and is then employed in a range of schools concurrent with her husband, who acquires his doctorate much later. As most immigrants will relate, she keeps her employment in linear succession while having a daughter and getting her permanent residency. Along the way, she gets misnamed by the wrong spelling of her name. Two conclusions one draws is that of an immigrant scientist woman who has to retain employment concurrent to marriage raises considerable challenges to many STEM women. Further, we see that she is given lower positions than her spouse prior to his receiving the doctorate, an experience reflected by many. While her husband is in Wisconsin, she chooses to separate and return to Berkeley and divorces in 1971. As her daughter says, my mother understood very well that she was raising two Black daughters. She knew that her adopted homeland would see Maya and me as Black girls, and she was determined to make sure we would grow into confident, proud Black women. Maya Lakshmi Harris and Kamala Devi Harris. The names are the sole reflection of her Tamil Indian heritage. When she divorced, she moved to the top floor of Bancroft Way, known as the Flatlands. While a scientist from Berkeley, she chose to live in an African-American neighborhood, and Kamala Harris was bused to white neighborhood schools. Her friends were African-American. Regina Shelton from Louisiana ran the nursery where the children got a good start. Posters of Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, and Harriet Tubman adorn the walls. This choice is unusual. African-American and Indian populations are not synonymous with being together. In 2012, a poll reflects a discrepancy with Indian Americans choosing white Americans over African Americans in degree of comfort in social settings. I'm drawn to this journey. As a doctoral student, I chose to study with the only African American faculty at SWE. I did it because he sent me a book chapter that paired out of the box thinking, exceptional reasoning, and potential to transform reliability in material selection. In my first semester, an African-American colleague came into the lab with a severely bruised face. He shared how he had been mistaken for a criminal when he reached for the key his wife left him under the doormat. I can still recall the horror it evoked. He relayed stories of being beaten up for being exceptional in math. Over my 3 years journey of the doctorate, I reflected on the well-dressed clothing my advisor would wear. He shared he had to dress well to be recognized as a professor. In a stark incident, we went to a materials conference in Boston, and the hotel desk clerk asked him to do 2 IDs to check in. He didn't protest, but as I watched, I soon realized I was not asked to do the same. I shared this observation with him, and he said, Nandika, you have more acceptance in America coming in as an immigrant than my family who has been here many generations. These years evoked in me the elements of advocacy I see in Shyamala Gopalan's journey. I reflected on her choice to live with the African-American women and my closest engineering allies being African-American women. Even in preparing for this presentation, I was able to solicit their thoughts, and the conversation was open, clear, and awakening. Many initially get surprised and even offended by my queries, only to realize that it is through these unfiltered, wild civil discussions that we can grow. I definitely encourage this in conferences such as Compass. If we have to journey forward, we have to remove the filters we apply to facts in order to feel good or to ensure acceptance. One stark realization of this is Kamala Gopalan's obituary, which adds the word Harris. Long divorced Indian woman with a last name on her obituary, one that she never used, Harris. One does not see it in her publications, nor in her references to her title at McGill, nor in her own dissertation. My thought is that we are limited in our impact in transforming the demographics of power because we are approaching what we see through a lens of equality, in the sense that we need to see the same group on either side of the equation. But this will never cause migration of power. We see a Tamil Indian woman, exceptional in intelligence, restricted by immigrant quotas, ascension in leadership unrecognized by titles of her position, choose to advocate for others. Recognize that her ability in Indian classical Carnatic music as a child, she comes to America and hums Aretha Franklin. Her daughter shares that she would both make okra, Indian style, as well as gumbo. This is what makes me want to propose a new policy of inclusion, an embrace of advocacy, a recognition of others. The Indian immigrant Shyamala clearly being denied her intellectual prowess in America, advocating for African Americans, teaches us a new way. We can look beyond the tendency to focus inward on the ills we are encountering, personally or as a group, and ensure ills are eradicated on principle, for all, for others. Ahead of a hate crime, we can be honest in recognizing and lending a voice to the marginalized. The demographics of America reflect much has to be done in the area of engineering and computer science. The racial and gender makeup of the STEM fields reflects such a gap. As we work with all hands on deck to alleviate the problem, we can do more to identify the resources for women that are available. And one group that comes to mind is the immigrant women population. Immigrants, for us, we can also realize that as we are entering America and advancing in the degrees that we obtain, we can be certain to be proactive, that we are inclusive in our own hiring. Let's look at the demographics of the academic culture. We see a discrepancy between the undergraduate student population and the faculty demographics. This will definitely cause a problem if like begets like, and we must be proactive in reaching out to the underrepresented minorities who have been systemically excluded from access to advanced education. SWE SHPE NSBE can embrace the immigrant population and the historically undersupported, systemically denied groups that came before us. My thought is that we can impact diversity to focus on multi-generational African American and Hispanics in America, systemically denied. Welcome all immigrants, populations with the overlap with current underrepresented minorities, and new immigrants previously restricted through quotas. Recognize the ill-treated or abused before a hate crime. Nothing is too hard. As Shyamala Gopalan said to Kamala, you may be the first to do many things, but make sure you are not the last. Challenging us to embrace the principle of doing the right thing for others more than for ourselves. We can both beat to our drum, defining our rhythm, and advocate for others. Change is going to come. This daughter of Shyamala today brings this hope to us. Immigrant women on the ground in educational institutions, impacting the future of the C-suite. Let's welcome the immigrants and immigrants stand up for injustice like Shyamala Gopalan did. We have to be ahead of the hate crime, stand up to iniquity, poor behavior, the ignored right when it happens. It is in the hands of each of us. Thank you very much, Compass.